On this week's Hear These Words, we get Hannah and her song and her desire to have a child that doesn't seem to be happening, but God turns it around. And then we hear in Hebrews about how Christ's sacrifice as the great high priest is sufficient and kind of outdoes all the rest of us, which is absolutely perfect. And then we hear in Mark Jesus warning about what is to come, a bit of an apocalyptic vision. Join us for this week's Hear These Words. Hello and welcome to Hear These Words, a podcast and video series from Good Shepherd Episcopal Church in beautiful Tequesta, Florida. I'm Sanford Groff, I'm the rector here, and each week on the podcast, we take a look ahead at the scriptures assigned for the upcoming Sunday. This upcoming Sunday is the 26th Sunday after the Pentecost, and we have, which is also proper 28B as in boy. We're coming to the end of year B next in basically 3 weeks. We'll be in year C, Advent 1. And the words we hear this Sunday are 1 Samuel chapter 1, 4 through 20. In place of the psalm, we have 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, also called the Song of Hannah. Hebrews 10, 11 through 25, with a couple of optional verses in there. And Mark 13, 1 through 8. Well, it's great to be together. It's been a couple of weeks. I actually was in here literally a week ago, and I began recording, and all of a sudden there was this knock on the door. No one was here, and I had to go out and help someone. And so the time just kind of slips by, and I've reached out to a few people to have guest appearances, and so hopefully we'll have some guests at some point in the future. But as we kind of come to the end of this liturgical year, the liturgical year ends on Christ the King Sunday, and that's the Sunday before the first Sunday of Advent, right? Advent is the 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas, and so we're coming here to the end of that. So we're going to be talking a little bit today about how these readings are shifting, what we've been doing in Mark, really to this end of the year motif. Looking at Christ the King, and certainly in the season of Advent, kind of preparing us for what is to come in terms of our, Christ's preparation for Christ's coming with John the Baptist and with Mary and Elizabeth, but also preparing for Christ's second coming, which is kind of an Advent theme. Good. So, excuse me. First Samuel 1, 4 through 20. This passage tells us the story of Hannah. Hannah, who is deeply distressed because she is unable to conceive, right? A theme that we've seen before in the scriptures. While her husband, Elkanah, tries to console her, she turns to God in prayer, promising to dedicate herself to the Lord if her prayers are answered. So the priest, Eli, who's in there, kind of initially misinterprets what her distress is all about, but eventually he blesses her. And God, of course, remembers Hannah, and then she conceives and bears a son, who is Samuel, right? So we're coming back to this. We've talked about Samuel weeks ago, and now we're getting the backstory to Samuel. But here we see how Hannah's story invites us to recognize God's attentiveness to personal suffering. And it reminds us of the transformative potential of genuine prayer. Her faith becomes a channel through which God's purposes unfold. And so we see this, even in the midst of distress, we see faithfulness. We see how even in suffering, God is present. And I think that this posture that Hannah has, this posture of humility, is one that should give us some, not just a model by which we might live our life, but actually gives us an alternative to a response, right? If we're feeling like we are in a place similar to her, where dreams are broken and things have been cast down, Hannah gives us a bit of an alternative to say, well, trust in God and go to God in prayer, and that allows and invites God's presence to be more fully realized from our perspective. Now, I don't normally talk a lot about the psalm, but today I think because it's so connected here, we get Hannah's song. And Hannah's song is a forerunner of Mary's Magnificat, right? So Mary, the Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus, ends up singing a song as well. So this is kind of a forerunner to that. It's a poetic response to God's provision. My heart exalts in the Lord. My strength is exalted in my God. And she goes on, there's no one like the Lord, no one besides you. He goes, the Lord, his adversaries shall be shattered. The Lord Most High will thunder in heaven, judge the ends of the earth, give strength to the king, and exalt the power of his anointed. Here we see divine justice and a reversal of fortunes, right? Where she was low, God has provided in a particular way. But our focus here in this is on how God lifts up those lowly and the humble. And how God lifts up the lowly and he humbles the mighty. So it's not just a univocal kind of message. It's really particular to where we find ourselves. So, if we're high and feeling great, be careful. That good things sometimes come to an end, and sometimes we experience corrections. But that is not to say that we should lose hope. And likewise, if we're feeling quite low, God is there to help lift our spirits and pick us up. And so Hannah's song shifts from personal gratitude about her situation regarding conceiving a child to a wider declaration of God's justice and sovereignty. This wider focus reminds us that God's reign extends to all creation, that God values justice, that God lifts up the lowly. And these are all key themes as we approach Christ the King Sunday. It also mirrors or kind of anticipates Advent in that it anticipates the longing that we have for God's justice in places where we don't feel like we have it. So we might feel like, how long, O Lord, right? How long, O Lord, will I endure, or will we endure? And yet Advent reminds us that there's a season of anticipation, and we kind of break it out in 4 weeks with hope and love and faith and joy. But as we look forward to that, we are looking really. It's not just a season of anticipation or hope for nothing. It's that Jesus is coming into the world, right? And that's going to change everything. And Hannah's song here seems to kind of foretell some of those themes. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low. He also exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts up the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. So I think it's quite beautiful, and I love that the lectionary writers have put these two readings together for us. Let's move on then to Hebrews. Hebrews, all about the priests who stand week after week at the altars offering sacrifices and yet offering again and again the same sacrifices that can never take away sins. But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice, he sat at the right hand of God, and since then has been waiting until his enemies would be a footstool for his feet. Here we have this idea of the finality and the sufficiency of Christ's sacrifice, that Christ is doing what in previous times had to be done over and over and over and again. Christ has done once and for all, and for all. The writer encourages us to draw near to God with confidence, right? So, therefore, my friends, since we have confidence to enter the sanctuary by the blood of Jesus, and to hold firm to the hope we profess, and in doing so, encourage one another. So here are the themes: fulfillment in Christ and confidence in faith and community support. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who is promised is faithful. And let us also consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. So it underscores Jesus's sacrificial and the completeness of that sacrifice, giving us confidence as we approach this upcoming, this weekend and then the next weekend, Christ the King. It is fitting to reflect on how Christ is our high priest, how Christ is our King, and provides a foundation of hope and unity in the church. I also think that this idea of our community of faith, it's a little ethereal. Like, it's not. I mean, there are certain tangible things that you can see here at Good Shepherd and say these are wonderful ways in which we are community, and yet often, as is the case with Hannah's story, often we don't really understand the value of that lifting up and that support of the community, of each other. Even something as simple as, saying peace to one another in the pews, that can have a profound impact on someone for whom life has really taken a turn not in the best direction. And so I think now more than, or now just as much time as ever, our call is to be united and supportive and loving. Our call is to lift up Jesus in our mind's eye, to celebrate and to worship Christ the King. And I think that is part of how we. I think that's part of how we kind of go through our own existences, regardless of the day. But because we know that we have a place. We have a place where we can be renewed and refreshed. We can be grounded. We can be kind of reoriented when things get a little bit wonky. And it's this is a good transition into Mark, because Mark here, chapter 13, is coming right at the heels. Jesus has been looking at the treasury last week, seeing the widow who puts in 2 copper coins. One of his disciples says, as Jesus comes out of the temple, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." And Jesus asks, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." And then, the disciples come up privately and say, "When will this be? What is the sign that this will happen?" And, Jesus goes into that, which I'll talk about in a second. What you need to understand historically here is that if this is in, 30 or 29 AD, somewhere in there, 40 years into the future, in 70 AD, that temple is going to be destroyed. So in 70, the temple of the Israelites gets destroyed by Rome, because there is increasing discontent with the way things are and the Roman occupation of their land. And not only that, but there is infighting between the different groups of Israelite people, of the Jewish people. And so you not only have the Roman oppressors, right, quote unquote, but you've also got this civil war that's basically brewing. And not only does that culminate in the destruction of the temple in 70, but then in 135, so another 65 years from then, Jerusalem is completely destroyed. It's burned to the ground, and by the Romans. So, So there's this sense in which there's this sense in which there are some things that are starting to happen within society that are precursors to this. Our society moves kind of quickly because of technology, right? There's we've got the internet, we've got, phones and communications, we've got kind of structured news outlets and organizations, TVs, all of that. They didn't have that. And so I think things moved more slowly back then, but Jesus says, listen, these things are going to happen. And they say, well, how are we going to know? What can we look for? He says, beware that no one leads you astray. Many are coming to say, I am he, and they will lead many astray. So the first thing to note is that there's deception, right? There are people who are claiming to be Jesus who are not. And there's going to be this deception around what is happening. And there'll be rumors of war. Don't be alarmed. This must take place. The end is to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes in various places and famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. And so Jesus here emphasizes, that, and I would not, there's a temptation in the history of Christian interpretation to read this as the end times, okay? There's a strong temptation. I'm not going to be one of the people who are tempted into that. This has a historical context in which this is happening, but I also think this is applicable in multiple different contexts throughout time. Not only do I think this is applicable perhaps with nations, as Jesus, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes and famines. I think this is possible within communities. I think this is possible within corporations and businesses. I think this is possible within families. I think you can kind of take something that's universal, right? The end of time and, all of this stuff. But I think you can distill it down to our civilized kind of governmental national level. I think you can distill it down to a corporate level, to a community level, to a parish level, to a family level. All of these things are ways in which we as humans have kind of operate. And Jesus is not a fool. And so basically, you see how great of a life you have? Well, I'm telling you, following me to the cross means that at some point, there's some part of that life that's going to have to go. That'll be thrown down. How will you know? There'll be deception. There'll be impersonation. There's going to be chaos, right? You can see even in a family dynamic how that can happen. There's going to be factions, nations against nations, kingdom against kingdoms. There's going to be factions within communities battling it out. There's going to be earthquakes, right? The foundation upon which you thought was firm is going to shift. There are going to be famines. There's going to be a lack of feeling like you're getting what you need. But don't lose hope, he says. These are just the birth pangs. And the way I read that is you're getting ready for transformation. You're getting ready for change. Things are going to change. And we might not like change. I'm not a big fan of change. I mean, I was not an associate for 9.5 years because I love change. That wasn't the only reason, but that was certainly one reason. What I can say is that in the lead up to me coming here about a year ago, you all went through a 1.5 years of change, and it doesn't seem like this happened in that kind of a way, and that signals to me that the health and vitality of this community. But again, this is why we come back to Christ the King someday, and then we move into the season of Advent, because it regrounds us. Because when those earthquakes come, in whatever level of humanity you want to look at that, when those earthquakes come and we feel like the foundation is loose and is going to fall away, we cling to Christ. We cling to God. We remember that there's nothing new under the sun, and that Jesus, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, abides with us always. And so, I don't know where you are with all of that. If you have a particular entry point into deception and chaos and foundational quaking and shaking, rumors of war and rumors of conflict. I'm not sure if that speaks to you today, but if it does in some way, I think that there's some good news for you, and that good news is that we are looking ahead together as a community to the ways in which God has big reversals. We're looking ahead to change and transformation that again is grounded not in some particular self-interest, but rather is grounded in the sovereignty of Jesus Christ. We're looking ahead, to a period where we still have hope and joy and love and faith in the season of Advent. And however it is that you feel like you're looking ahead or not, I still think that call that we hear in Hebrews rings true in this place, which is that as a community of believers, as a fellowship, our job is to support and love one another. Some people are going to be high, right? Some people are king of the world. I'm on top of it all. I feel like life is going great. I mean, at some level, I kind of count myself in that group right now. I've got just an incredible community, an incredible place to be and to live and to grow and to learn, incredible people around me. And so I feel like there are so many blessings. And yet, even in my state, I'm also called to be with those who might be feeling the complete opposite. People who feel like these are dark days. People who feel like they are in a particular way and need to be uplifted by God, because what God might be doing is using the blessings that I feel in order to share those, to lift up someone who's low. And in that way, Hannah's song rings true. In that way, we're coming low. We're humbling ourselves to lift others up. And in so doing, we find and we meet God again and again and again. I hope that this has been a blessing to you. I hope you're having a blessed day. If there's anything that we can do for you here at Good Shepherd, please reach out anytime. And thank you for joining us. Give us a like if you like this, subscribe if you care to follow us for future episodes, share it with someone else. It's always good to share. And now we hope that you are prepared to hear these words. We'll see you soon.